My name's Frank Moe. On March 1st of this year, I drove a team of 10 of my sled dogs from right here in Harbor Park in Grand Marais, and we spent 8 days traveling down the trail and delivered 12,000 petition signatures to the governor at the Capitol. And the petition was in protest of sulfide mining, or the potential to have sulfide mining here in northeastern Minnesota. I was at a sled dog race in 2011, the last race of the season, and every now and then we'd go past an old mining site, you know, and I was thinking about how sulfide mining or precious metals mining had really changed the landscape over there. Not just the landscape, but the economy, and how it was such a boom and bust economy. And thinking about how that could be our future, but it doesn't have to be. And it was like it all came to me at that time. I thought, these dogs right here are gonna take me all the way from Grand Marais to the Capitol. We're going to deliver a bunch of petitions to the governor and to the legislature, and we're going to try to spread the word about the perils of sulfide mining and what that would mean, how that would transform northeastern Minnesota forever.
I'm Mark Lutnan, and my main job on the sled dogs to St. Paul was to be the dog's handler. I talked to Frank during the mail run. He said that he was looking for someone to handle dogs for him for the run from Grand Marais to St. Paul. So I figured, yeah, I'll do it, you know. And in the time between he asked and we actually got out there, I started to actually look at what was going on with the sulfide mining and started to learn a little bit more, and I got pretty concerned.
My name's Adam Haryu, and my role, I guess, would be the logistics coordinator for our trip southbound. Frank and I have actually gone back many years, and he caught me one day and said, hey, you know, I've got this idea that we want to raise some awareness. I want to run a team of dogs to St. Paul. And without really much hesitation, I was like, I'm in.
Well, my name is Dr. Jerry Vanek, and I'm a veterinarian, semi-retired, now living in Grand Marais, Minnesota. For a number of years now, my practice has been limited quite exclusively to sled dogs and canine athletes. So my closest analogy would be a human sports medicine type physician, except instead of going to the Olympics and massaging Michael Phelps, I go to places like the Iditarod and massage world-class sled dogs. Frank reminded me very much of old Joe Roulette, of course, who was one of our most famous early Minnesota legislators. They were legislators in the southern part of the state who wanted to move the capital to St. Peter, and they wanted a long horizontal state. But Joe Roulette, being from northern Minnesota, was the fellow who stole the bill before the governor could sign it. And that's why we have our capital in St. Paul to this day, and why Minnesota is a vertical state running north and south. So here's a fellow doing, about 130 years later, what was done by old Joe Roulette in the 1850s. And so when he came to me this last winter with the email and said, I'm going to do this again, I'm going to be hauling petitions to save our state, in a sense, it took me about 2 minutes to say yes.
Snow was an issue. We figured first week of March would be no problems. Well, there was no snow anywhere except for here along the North Shore. So that was kind of in the back of our mind.
The dogs I wasn't too concerned about. We used booties. We watched them in terms of their musculoskeletal integrity, and so I really had no concerns about the dogs in particular. It was more about going down a highway with sparks flying from the back of a dog sled because there was no snow in this kind of year.
It wasn't just about us getting the dogs to St. Paul. Like, we knew we could do that, but we wanted to make sure that we involved communities along the way.
I could see that Frank was going to do this, whether he had to run on bare runners the whole way, he was going to do it. So I went to him and I said, Frank, I will do anything you need me to do to make this happen.
He had this idea. We're like, well, you know, it hasn't snowed yet, and I don't know if you're going to be lucky enough to get snow, but I'm with you if you do. And he says, I don't care, we don't need snow, we'll just go on the runners on the pavement if we have to, we're going.
And he said, hey, I've got this idea. He said, we need a game changer. We need to change the tone of the conversation that's happening around sulfide mining in Minnesota. I want to bring some petitions to Governor Dayton, and I want to bring a message to him from the north that we need to take seriously the threats to our water and our land that are going to come from sulfide mining.
What before had been, these environmental groups had all thought, well, let's just try to make this mining not be as polluting. Let's try to take the edge off how bad it would be. They all of a sudden started saying, well, maybe we can stop it.
There is an enormous explosion of prospecting activity across northern Minnesota, including right near the Boundary Waters Wilderness Canoe area. And there's also the first full-scale proposal that Minnesota has ever seen for copper mining, and that's the Polymet mine. And that would require loss of over 6,000 acres of Superior National Forest land. And the actual environmental review done by the company shows that the Polymet project would cause destruction of wetlands, water pollution for as much as 2,000 years. So this is a really new, serious issue.
Well, sulfide mining is an interesting term because they're not mining for sulfide. They're actually mining for things such as copper and other precious types of metals that are used in our computers and other forms of technology. And the amount that they actually are able to mine is pretty minuscule compared to the damage that is put on the landscape. Sulfide mining is one of, if not the most harmful types of mining. And when you go in and you mine for these types of metals that there's very small traces of, you compromise groundwater. Sulfides are released into the earth and into that groundwater. And if sulfide mining were to come to this area, it would be the largest in North America.
This is different than the traditional iron ore mining that we have in Minnesota. So we're talking about the difference between rust from taconite mining and sulfuric acid, which is kind of like battery acid. The real challenge for the mining companies is how do you contain that in a way that you're guaranteed that's never going to leak. I mean, right now they haven't been able to figure out how to do that.
The corporations behind these companies are not Minnesota companies. For example, with Polymet, their parent company is Glencore, which is a Swiss company who has actually a pretty devastating history of human rights and environmental violations. Glencore is the parent company that's funding and behind Polymet. Antofagasta is based in Santiago, Chile, is behind Twin Metals, which has kind of taken in the whole gamut of Boundary Waters area.
I'm not sure why we think that they'll treat Minnesota any differently. Why we'll somehow get special treatment. If they go into third world countries and exploit workers and pollute water simply because they can get away with it, that's not the kind of corporate citizen Minnesota needs.
We are at a crossroads, a critical crossroads where we are making decisions that will significantly alter, or not, the future of northern Minnesota.
I would remind people, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. John Grock. I'm with the Iron Range Building Trades. I'm representing the 2,000 plus men and women of the building trades on the Iron Range. Now, when you talk about mining, one word that comes to your mind is steelworkers. It's not only the steelworkers that are involved in mining, it's also the building trades. These are good paying jobs. You can't say anything else about that when they're building the place or if it's maintenance after the place is built. We support the mining projects on the range. We have supported them. The Esser project in Nashwauk, Keetac expansion in Keewatin, and the non-ferrous mine.
I've been asking a lot of people, would you prefer health or wealth? And they look at me like I'm stupid for asking the question. Well, of course, I prefer health. But this full bore charge, jobs, 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 is not necessarily going to make us a balanced, healthy community.
My name is Ray Jensen. I work at Hibbing Community College. I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Customized Training. We work very hard at our college to become a sustainable college on a regular basis. And we would like to let you know that we do support expansion of the mineral industry in northeastern Minnesota to include the non-ferrous minerals, utilizing the proper environmental standards.
They have said, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. Fool the general public and make it pay its tax dollars for the cleanup that will resolve over and over and over and over again. Shame on our public officials.
You know, the calm before an event like that, it's just really pretty, it's almost eerie, you know? And you just wonder, all this planning, you know, are people gonna come? Is this gonna happen?
I mean, 200 people turned out on that day, slushy day in March.
The drummers that came down, the sounds were amazing, the dogs barking, the people talking, the speakers were amazing.
I'm Gina Macy.
I'm Jan Attridge, and we put together the Mask Project. The Mask Project was all about giving a voice to the animals because they've been left out. It's all been about, it's been from the mining viewpoint of financial value. That's what we had to give a voice to them.
And it was quite a rush. When Frank took off, I got chills. Off he went down the slushy, bare street.
We just drove right out of town, right down Highway 61 and up onto the snowmobile trail, and then it was just kind of like free.
Well, my name is Bill Hansen, H-A-N-S-E-N, and we're at Sawbill Lake on the edge of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. In fact, the forest you see behind me is in the wilderness. Sulfide mining is of great concern to me as a business person that does my business in the wilderness. It's a very dangerous kind of mining and has never successfully been done anywhere on Earth without very severe pollution. The actual mining process has become less harmful over time, but no one solved the problem of what to do with the tailings. And the tailings ultimately produce sulfuric acid, which is of course disastrous to the downstream ecosystem.
The environmental community on this particular issue of sulfide mining is split. There is a split in terms of how they want to approach it. Some of them, primarily those in northern Minnesota, wanted to see a ban. They wanted to see us do exactly what Wisconsin did. And Wisconsin had an early bad experience, which moved them to pass a bill that said, do it somewhere else first. And so totally on my own, without any of the traditional environmental groups who've worked on this, I just introduced the Prove It First bill. But it was because citizens up north were organizing around that theme. That was the final push. All of these research studies show that when you only depend on the natural resource for your economy, the economic line is flat. When a region says this isn't working and we should diversify our economy, then you begin to see some growth.
It's very clear that very few people would actually benefit from allowing this kind of destruction from sulfide mining in northern Minnesota. So if we look at it, well, how do we build our economy? How do we build a better life? How do we build better communities while at least doing no harm? Sulfide mining isn't even on the list of things you'd want to consider.
From the minute we left, to the minute we stopped, it was just kind of like there was 3 of us on the crew, and we were just leapfrogging with each other, trying to get to every single road crossing before Frank did. And along the North Shore it was pretty easy because we have a lot of uninterrupted natural area. But then the farther south we got, there were roads like every quarter mile, and so we worked pretty hard.
Friday, we were going to Finland, and we were going to meet at Finland Community Center. Well, 2 days before, another group had taken off from Ely, Dave and Amy Freeman, and there had been a rally in Ely, just like we had in Grand Marais, and they had been collecting petitions for a long time in Ely. Dave and Amy Freeman come with their team, and together we went on into Finland to the community center. A little event there in Finland. They had a bonfire, and it was pretty nice.
Hi there, my name's Todd Ronning, and I'm a Two Harbors resident. And on my wife's side of the family, we're fortunate enough to own a piece of property in the Toimi area, which was part of her great-grandfather's homestead back from 1912. I was just curious to know who else were property owners in the neighborhood, and so when I searched the St. Louis County website and kept running across this RGGS Minerals, that's when I noticed that they had the same parcel description as mine. And I thought there must have been some mistake until a little bit further research showed that their parcel description was described as severed minerals, while mine was just a surface ownership.
The Minnesota state government owns mineral rights under approximately 1/4 of our state. And there is an old law, it's about 100 years old, that says that if a mining company wants to prospect or explore or dig up minerals under private property, that they can ask the Attorney General to go in and condemn that land out by eminent domain, so that the mining company has the right to go onto your property and take it if they want to explore or prospect for minerals.
Well, when we first got the news about the Toimi property, my wife and I were pretty excited about that, and we started talking about what we might choose to do up there. We tossed around ideas like a retirement home or maybe a cabin or whatnot, but once we learned of the severed mineral interest and the rights that mineral interest companies still retain, even regarding the surface of the property, it's really toned down our willingness to make any serious investment in the property.
The Iron Range has a long history of entire towns being moved. I mean, U.S. Steel recently bought the whole city of Parkville, and people that wanted to move their houses could, but I never heard one complaint from a property owner, not a one.
I grew up on the Iron Range, graduated from high school in 1973 from Mountain Iron High. My father worked in the mines all of his life at Mintac, and a lot of my friends went on to work in the mines. And then after I got out of college, they started swallowing up the little town, the little village where I grew up, Parkville, and it was just rather shocking to see a whole village where my ancestry came from being swallowed by these huge mines.
I feel like we're at a funeral for a house here in Parkville. It isn't a house, it's a memory, it's a family memory. It's not something that's detached, it's not a piece of land that has a house on it. There was a whole family that lived in this house. They don't got no place to come no more after this is gone. I was walking up the street today and I was feeling a yearning to go back there to see, what happens. People didn't ask us, we didn't really have a choice. My name's Keith Malvin Sokola. My name is Masabi Wainini. I'm the hereditary chief of the Iron Range. Welcome to my pile of shit. Shanabe ki babaya okiwa bandan gage gigi she Gamushkwa Wakoka, Gosh God and Nani, Yaki Gabi Oshitamagoyan, O Ine Dakim, O Igedakim, Medawima, Yechigami, Gamushkwa Wakoka, Gosh God and Nani, Yaki Gabi Oshitamagoya. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Gulf Stream water to the Iron Range. This land was made for you and me. Yaki Gabi Oshitamago. We belong to the earth. The earth does not belong to us.
Well, we had it organized so when I got to just about a quarter of a mile away from Lester Park, I was going to call Ian Kimmer from Friends of the Boundary Waters, who was helping coordinate this Duluth event.
People were kind of congregating, and then I got Little Horse Drum Group set up, and you can feel the power of the roots of that music and those songs that go far back into history. I mean, those who talk about we are a mining place, our history is mining, and if they hear that music, instantly you realize there's a history in this region that goes far further into history than mining does. So everyone's kind of like a little bit on edge about when are the dogs coming? Where are the dogs? And then finally the dogs came down, and you saw it, and everyone just burst out into cheer. There was probably 200 people just cheering as he came down.
My name is Karen Diver. I am the chairwoman of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. We're a federally recognized tribe located near Cloquet, Minnesota. We have about 4,400 tribal members, and our reservation land base is about 100,000 acres. In the Treaty of 1854, however, we retained what's called the right to hunt, fish, and gather in the ceded territories, which is all of northeastern Minnesota. To be very clear with people, the band is not anti-mining, we are anti-pollution. And companies who come here and want to do extractive industries really need to make the investment in making sure that there's no long-term environmental and health impacts because of their activities. Wild rice, which is one of our sacred foods, is impacted by high sulfide levels. So those natural kind of ecosystems should be preserved in the environment that they were naturally.
My name is Len Anderson from Cloquet, Minnesota. I started harvesting wild rice in 1954. And to this day, it's one of my favorite places because it's one of wildlife's favorite places. As a trained naturalist, I just see this as just an ecological gem. Problem being that for its various reasons, this is an extremely vulnerable plant. To get from this beautiful flower to the mature grain at the top, that's a very difficult thing. This is one of the most sensitive plants we know of for any pollutant, and then in particular for the sulfate ions. The most troubling part of this sulfate saga right now is mining, because in the process of opening up the earth and bringing rock to the surface, and these rocks contain sulfide minerals. It doesn't matter if it's taconite or metallic sulfide mining. It doesn't matter. They both do it.
I mean, it's safe to drink. It's safe to drink water with 250 milligrams per liter. That's the standard for drinking water. But somehow we have a provision, a very arbitrary provision in law that says, well, only 10 millimeters is the right number for sustainability of wild rice. We don't have a clue if that's totally arbitrary, if it means anything. If it's 10, it's 10. If that's what the sign shows, that's fine. People will have to figure out how they deal with that. But if it is 10, we got real trouble, because we probably don't have a wastewater treatment plant anyplace that's going to be able to meet that.
Well, it goes back to a guy named John B. Moyle, who was a DNR scientist. He did some mapping, and now we have a very good line exactly where the sulfate concentration gets high enough and wild rice disappears. We're now generating tonnage of man-made sulfates and dumping them into our waterways. You can do something about it. All of these industries can clean up their sulfate, but what's the price? It's pretty costly.
The most glaring example of how the mining companies don't want to play by the rules is the wild rice sulfate standard. Mining companies went to the courts in December of 2010, and they said, get rid of the wild rice sulfate standard and don't have it applied to protect natural stands of wild rice. So what we see is when the mining companies don't want to comply with the standard, instead of investigating treatment options to reduce their pollution, what they do is they go after the regulations themselves.
I think we as a society have got to demand it, that you pay the price. If you want to extract our minerals, that's our minerals, not their minerals, on our land and in our watersheds, you will do it the way the state of Minnesota says you have to do it, and that is you will limit your sulfate releases to 10 milligrams per liter.
We made it, you know, we got to Duluth. And there were a lot of road crossings coming into Duluth, a lot of logistical challenges. You know, 70 miles is kind of a long day for a dog team. And it just kept going. But the dogs are doing fine, and we got word that actually another couple, a retired couple, the Dibvigs in Sandstone, said that they would put us up there.
I'm Lee Dibvig, live here in Sandstone, Minnesota. It's about halfway between Duluth and Minneapolis. We've lived here in Sandstone about 40 years. Well, I'll let Dorothy introduce herself.
And I'm Dorothy Dibvig. When we heard that Frank and the team of sled dogs were coming down from the Duluth area down through Sandstone, we were curious as to when they would be coming and if there was any chance we could get to see them. But I knew they needed some good, hearty comfort food. And when I got home from my meeting, I had fixed a giant meatloaf, and there was one little thin slice left. And they had been so appreciative of a home-cooked meal and something warm at the end of the long day when they'd been out in the cold.
Pretty soon after leaving Sandstone, the snow started to fade.
You know, just keeping the dogs motivated was a little bit of a challenge, but they're always game to go. So, you know, the equipment took a beating, but the dogs just kept on going.
Finally, I crossed this road, and it's this woman that I didn't know, but she says, "Hi, Frank, it's Cindy Hickey."
I met Frank actually north of Pine City at a road crossing, and kind of cheered him on and told him I was very much supporting his cause. And then Jim and I assisted him all the way down to North Branch, and I can't even count the road crossings that we crossed, but we helped him for most of the afternoon.
And we come into this small town, and there's people lined up along the road, or along the trail, like waiting for us as we're coming into this town. It was like Iron Will or something. You know, these people somehow heard this dog team's coming to town. So these people are on the side of the road clapping for us. You know, we weren't we were trying to get to North Branch. We weren't there yet.
It was hot day, way too hot for running dogs. And so I grabbed as many empty water jugs as I could find, got them full of Gatorade, and then we got in the car and went to Harris, which is about 4 miles north.
Out of nowhere, some guy shows up and brings me this Gatorade. Well, it turns out that Johnny and Judy Vitek live in North Branch, and they'd called and said that they would put us up that night.
Thursday, during the day, Frank had got news that the governor wasn't going to meet with him.
So a lot of her friends, people who had helped with the event in Duluth and people who had helped with the event in Grand Marais, were outraged.
We called everybody we knew.
We called everybody we knew, but he didn't want us to put it on Facebook because that was a little too out there. But we called some people and said, call the governor's office and talk to his secretary or his assistant and ask her why that he has canceled the meeting.
They were so upset that we weren't going to get to meet with the governor. They were all going to come down and they were going to storm the Capitol, the governor's office, big protest. They were going to, you know, they were going to get us in to see the governor. We spent the next 2 hours on the phone talking to everybody, pleading with them to try to get them to not come crash the Capitol.
The last morning, starting out from Stillwater, and was going to take the Gateway Trail from Stillwater into St. Paul. And again, there had been no snow, and there was this beautiful little flurry of precipitation, just enough to coat the blacktop that he was running the sled on.
Between there and the Capitol, there were easily 100 road crossings. And so we had 8 people there, 5 cars, and we were going to try to man as many of them as possible, but we knew we weren't going to be able to get to all of them. I knew I was just going to have to trust the dogs. And I said, okay, you guys, I got to go. We're running late. And they just let me go, and off we went. Then the trail, before I knew it, then the trail was done, and it just stopped. And we're right at the trailhead where we had planned to meet. All the handling crew was right there, and I knew we were 15 blocks at that point from the Capitol. There was no snow, there was no trail. From then on, it was just all city streets. And I'd rehearsed this route, you know, and so I knew in my head every place that we needed to go, and I just, every time we'd come to a turn, I'd just call out the command, G or Ha, and the dogs would just make the turn, no problem, right in the city streets. And we crested the hill, came down Cedar Street, and I looked over to the right, and there was the rally. And there's the Capitol. Adam hopped out, and he's running next to us, and David's running there, and Sherry's running behind us, and the team just went right up the sidewalk, just like magic, you know, right into the crowd.
So as he approached the Capitol, he made the wide turn, and the dogs just were fearless. It was as if they knew where they were going.
It was such a neat atmosphere. You know, those of us that just kind of came out of the woods and all these like urban people hanging around the Capitol building.
Just kind of brought tears to my eyes, and again, I just felt really good being a part of it.
It was a good feeling to have been a part of something that's way bigger than just me, you know. I could have an impact on other people. I could have a voice where I haven't had one before.
To reach your end goal, you know, the euphoria that Frank was probably feeling, completing this mission this far and then taking those petitions and actually giving them to the governor was probably just a phenomenal feeling.
We want to hear from you, Frank.
Depend upon clean water.
Frank!
You know, I talked to Adam, the head logistics guy, for getting down here, and just an hour ago, and I said, Adam, I got to think about something to say, you know, because sorry, we've been working at this thing nonstop, just to get the dogs here and to collect the petitions. We have 12,500 signatures that have been collected in Minnesota, all over, and these are people that say, listen, clean water, sustainable jobs, the 30,000 plus or minus jobs in the Northeast that are dependent upon that clean water are too important to compromise for a toxic experiment in northeastern Minnesota. And we just got to say no to that. This has never been done safely anywhere else. Anywhere else. And they say, oh, but we've got it figured out, we'll be fine. You know what? I don't want to risk that for Minnesota's crown jewels. We're talking about Lake Superior, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, Voyageurs National Park, and all the lakes and rivers and streams up in northeastern Minnesota that are our lifeblood up there. This is why we live there. It's our home.
He had said he wasn't going to meet with us, but you know, I promised that I was going to do everything I could to give these petition signatures to the governor directly. And so I was just prepared to go sit in his office, you know. So I walk up the Capitol steps, had a few people with me, big stack of petitions, and I just walked up the stairs and went into the governor's office. Well, then his chief of staff comes out. He said, "Frank, you know, the governor's really busy. I mean, he's got a booked schedule, and you know, there's just no way we can get you in to see him." And I said, "Listen, I spent 8 days on the trail with these dogs. I promised all these people I would give the signatures to the governor personally. Next thing you know, there's Governor Dayton. He's in the lobby, and I stand up and he says, 'Hi, Frank, good to see you.'" You know. So I said, "Hi, Governor Dayton. I just want to thank you for coming out. I have almost 13,000 petition signatures for you. These are from Minnesotans mostly, but from people all over who are concerned about sulfide mining and what that'll do to our clean water and to our jobs. I'd like you to think about that."
It was challenging as we were driving home from St. Paul that day. Where do you go from here? You know, this is just the jumping off point, and there's so much more to be done.
You know, in a world where we're quickly running out of fresh water, this is the largest source of fresh water in the world between the boundary waters and the Lake Superior. You know, we are to fresh water what Saudi Arabia is to oil, and to put that at risk for even a 30-year gain of jobs and employment, it just doesn't seem like a good bargain to me.
I'm 100 miles as a crow flies from Ely, but I think if they find value in this, they can change legislation, and they won't stop drilling until they're at the foot of the witch tree up on the Grand Portage Reservation. I don't want to take that chance. This is one of the last places in this country where you can find peace and clean water, clean air.
The good news is none of these mines have happened yet. You know, we still are on the front end. We still can prevent these mines from going in the ground. So people need to keep educating themselves.
Start screaming. Don't shut up until they go away. As far as I'm concerned, even if we don't live in a democracy right now, we should keep working to make it one. We have a responsibility to resist this.
I think as I look back, I know I could see that Frank was truly in his element. He was the image of all of us who felt as though we were citizens doing what citizens do in a country like ours. Sometimes the citizenry has to rise up and bypass the representatives and go directly to the leadership and say, you know, our needs or whatever are not being met. And this was a case like that. And there was a case where Frank, as our leader, was the embodiment of how those few of us who were working with him every day felt. And then as the other volunteers came on through the Pine City area, Hinckley and that region, we saw more and more of it as people opened their homes to us as their show of support. Again, it was the citizenry. And then, of course, we had people showing up at the Finland Community Center and people at Lester Park in Duluth by the hundreds. And so you see, again, active citizen involvement. And then the thousands of petitions that we were carrying in the sled were all indications of a people in a country made of and by and for the people actually speaking out. And so in retrospect, that I think is what struck me the most. And so I would look at Frank on his dog sled and I would see Joe Roulette, and I would say the individual, you know, still counts in this country.